Yep, good, yeah.
Hello. I'm Brian, and this is going to be my question for my report. Could the weaponisation of popular music lead to a more oppressive society? The contents of this PowerPoint will include a summary of what I aim to include in the final report, my current reading, and a quote taken from one of the books. I'll be looking at state and society, their involvement, and the possibility of surveying the general public and gaining their views. And I will end with a conclusion detailing my report structure and future plans. To summarise, I'm going to be researching into popular music and its audience and how they interact with each other, try to establish connections between the two, and possibly how this relationship between the two is taken advantage of by higher powers. The idea of looking between the higher powers of music, look at their relationship, like I just said, restrictions placed on the artist by governments or state bodies, and the implications and consequences of said exploitation. My current reading of books, I didn't make any sense. Scrap that. No. Kind of works. Okay, books I'm pretending to read and finding interesting. Popular music and state in the UK, it examines why politicians and policymakers in the UK they sought to intervene in popular music, what are the restrictions. The trouble with music, like Callahan, looks at how it is a critique of music fabricated by the music industry for mass consumption, while also exploring the alternatives. And popular music in society covers how pop music is received, understood, and used by its audiences. Except in The Trouble of Music, Matt Callahan argues that music of the oppressed is right now music. It is always intimately linked to generations of suffering and struggle within a particular context, but it derives its vitality from being made right now because of what it does right now for the sufferers. He said that. State and society involvement, survey questions. Okay. Yeah, there's a quote about how the state's involvement with the music. This basically summarises in the increasing involvement of the state in turn limits and shapes existing songs and musicians, threatening retaliation against individuals unwilling to comply with the demand of censors and other officials will be the consequences of going against their rules and regulations. The idea of trying to collect data from the state and public collectively is going to be done via surveys using SurveyMonkey. After that, I'll consolidate the results in a visual representation using Microsoft Excel. We'll be placed in a bar chart, or no, possibly pie chart, sorry, and then compare those to those of the industry, and look at whether these two sets of views coincide or go against each other, and if so, how. These are some rough survey questions I've drawn up. These questions are based on trying to find out if the listener feels restricted with their music, and if they are being restricted, say if they listen to the radio every day, and see if they're somewhat being having a narrow view on their music. Yeah, I've yet to launch this publicly, so still some work needs to be done on that. Conclusion and the alert, sorry, this is my report structure and future plans. This is my current report structure. I think I'm going to be sticking with it. It's kind of divided up between introduction, the popular music and how it interacts with its audience. Next I'll look at society's view and then incorporate the survey results I gained from that. Then I'll be looking at industry view and how they exploit this relationship listener has with their music, and then finally end with concluding, comparing the two views, and then end with references about the through. What I plan to do after this is identify how popular music interacts with both its audiences and regulators. Next, we'll be looking at how the relationships between the music and the listener can be exploited. Then finally, look towards the implications and consequences this could inflict on the general population. There are no questions in bibliography. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm slightly concerned with the notion of you just saying popular music, because it's really vast, and you're going to need to, I mean, how are you actually meaning to use this? What's your theoretical framework? I can kind of see what it would be, but it's not in there. I also feel that to some degree, because of the way that you're wording these things, you're actually priming what the results are going to be. You're kind of anticipating what the results are.
It's somewhat of a loaded question.
It is, and I think you're going to need to, particularly with your questionnaire, is do you find listening to the radio restrictive? Well, if someone listens to the radio all the time, notions of restriction aren't even going to be factored into their equation because they might not think there's anything else. You see what I mean? So if they're only listening to one particular form of music through one medium, then it's going to narrow their worldview, and that's the only thing they're going to sort of access. You see what I mean? So I think you're going to need to be very careful to construct questions that don't prime the answer. So, for example, with your question, with your main question, sorry, can you just pull it back up again? There we go. So, could the weaponisation of popular music lead to a more oppressive society? The way that this is structured as a question, you're automatically going to think, well, yes. See what I mean? The way that you're kind of engineering a response here. So the notion of weaponisation, you're going to need to kind of break down how you mean to use that and what you mean by it. You're going to need to kind of deconstruct or analyse or break down the notion of popular music. I mean, do you mean mainstream music?
Yeah, mainstream. I didn't want to limit myself to a specific genre.
But I think you're going to need to do something here because that's far too vast. So I think if you say, well, mainstream music, that will certainly allow you a more focused argument that isn't detracting actually away from what it is that you want to discuss. But actually, I think there's some very solid ideas in there, but you just need to kind of chip away at it a little bit more. Great stuff. Thanks very much. Great. Thank you, Ryan.